So I have some proposals to put forward. Initially, this meeting was imagined as sort of the launching of a group that would continue from where we left off with the hands across the same demonstration. Because, you know, one flash in the pan is lovely, but it doesn't actually change laws. It doesn't actually create enough pressure to change policy. The proposals that this group could adopt, I'd like to, you know, these are just mine. We can talk about them and vote on this afterwards. First of all, okay, sorry. Yeah, first, the outright seizure and nationalization of BP's assets in or near the United States. The company can clearly not be trusted with delivering oil in a safe manner to its employees or the environment. I'm not talking about the bailout style of nationalization where costs are socialized but the profits remain private. I'm saying the revenues, oil, and management of BP assets in the USA should now belong to the democratic decision-making of the American people. So implied in that first proposal is two others. One is that we should support the idea of BP fully covering the cost of its disaster. Duh. Another is that the cleanup process itself be properly overtaken by federal agencies, instead of essentially leaving BP in charge of the mess that is currently, as has currently been done, as was also done with the banks. We need to demand that the government establish free, quality healthcare facilities for people in the Gulf region affected by oil pollution. No one should have to go to a facility with a BP logo on it, since those have been appearing. We need to demand that the government ensures the safety and health of anyone working in the BP cleanup. In that vein, we need to demand utter, total transparency of the cleanup process to the public. Journalists must be allowed to freely come and go. We need to push for a banning of offshore drilling. Clearly, we can trust neither the corporations nor government regulators enough to take any further risks in that vein. We need to act as a continual harassing pressure on government regulators to do the job that we hire them to do instead of being cozy with the private sector. We need to push for this is, in my mind, one of the biggest parts. We need to push for a massive federal jobs program, similar to the New Deal of the 1930s, to the tunes of hundreds of billions or even trillions of dollars, which does not take small token steps or reforms, but begins seriously transitioning the USA away from an oil-based economy as a solution to both economic and environmental crisis. This is not an issue for future generations. This is a serious, practical proposal which cannot be launched soon enough and is really long overdue. You may notice that none of the solutions suggested above are individual consumer solutions. It's actually not scientifically possible to reverse climate change or transition the entire economy to, through the purchase of small personal photovoltaic cells. It's also utterly impractical and even offensive to ask broken, indebted working people to change the way they get themselves to work every day, when the real determining factor, the bulk of productive power controlled by big industry, is not making appropriate changes and even fighting against them. We cannot do this alone. We cannot do this as a movement of individual consumers. Compared to the 1% of the population that owns a third of the national wealth, we really have no significant purchasing power. Yes, customer and investor backlash are now damaging BP, but this is a backlash. The market did not prevent the problem. We need to throw out the idea that environmentalism requires sacrificing ordinary people's standard of living. It doesn't. What it requires is a forcible intervention of the popular will into the way the economy works, in order to force it to go green, as opposed to continuing to let private corporate interests plan and organize it, since they do not gain from ending environmentally damaging practices. As a people, we must govern the way our resources are used. We need federal level intervention, and the next question would be how we get that. I propose we be the angry mob with pitchforks. It has worked for the Tea Parties very well, and there is no reason why we shouldn't learn from their success. There is often a very strong temptation to go for the respectable route and to strive for your political demands by politely meeting with public officials. Because public officials are human individuals, we get easily seduced by their human faces, and we start thinking that if we only communicated with them more, we would really make things happen. They just need the information, we tell ourselves. The problem is that they don't represent humanity. Their faces are human, but they represent big business because that's who pays for their election campaigns. Since 2009, the Democratic Party has received about 60% of the electric industry's campaign contributions, according to the British newspaper The Guardian. According to the Wall Street Journal, Obama raised about $100 million more for his election campaign than McCain did. He was the first candidate to break the $300 million record. Contrary to the myth that he was backed by small donors, about 3/4 of his funds came from people donating more than $200. There is a public notion that Republican politicians owe their political existence to funding by big business. Now, I don't dispute this, but it needs to be balanced with the understanding that Democratic politicians are really no different on this account, and therefore no more interested interested in dismantling the petroleum industry or impeding cheap, unsafe extraction of resources. The proof is in the pudding. Obama supports offshore drilling. He supports expansion of other forms of domestic drilling and is more than doubling government loans to the nuclear industry. If you contact your representatives, they might send you a friendly letter in response, or they might meet with you, especially if they were already going to vote the way you wanted. And then they'll go ahead and do what they were going to do anyway. The Grand Canyon between Obama's rhetorical image and his policies and practice should really drive this home. There is also a prejudice that protest does not sway the actions of politicians. I believe quite the opposite. For example, during the Vietnam War, Lyndon B. Johnson publicly pretended that he was not affected by the NRA protesters on his front lawn. In private, however, he made a number of large strategic decisions based on their presence, and even rejected one proposal to use nuclear weapons by asking how quickly the people out front would lynch him if he did that. Protest confronts public officials with the threat of being perceived as out of touch with the people. I mean, you know, maybe they are, but protest crystallizes an awareness of this in the public mind to an extent that creates a crisis of legitimacy for governments, which they respond to by granting public demands that otherwise they would not concede. This is how everything from black civil rights to the 8-hour workday was fought for and won. For example, in the environmental line, new coal plants were going to be installed in the United Kingdom, and actually a protest campaign shut that drive down. In the USA, you know, we might be beginning to see the beginnings of this. You know, the Hands Across the Sand protest was actually a worldwide phenomenon. In New York City, I think about 2 months ago, there were a bunch of naked bikers who rode around the town, just causing havoc, you know, just connecting it to the oil spill. What we really need are national marches in Washington, D.C. to demand the banning of offshore drilling, a massive energy transition jobs program, and many of our other demands. Between marches, we need to be continuing educating, informing, and organizing ourselves locally around global and national environmental issues. We can keep throwing protests regionally and locally, even around non-local issues. They have a cumulative effect if many groups across the country regularly do it. As a general rule, you both inspire and involve more people and get more done by fighting at a big level for the whole planet than you do by fighting for the patch of grass in your own town. The local issues don't have to be totally ignored. Still, one is a matter of global life and death, and the other just isn't. We need to organize a mass participatory local group here. We should meet on a regular basis. I guess I propose every 2 weeks, and set up the practices described above. Obviously, we can't do this alone. We need people around the state and the country doing the same thing. We can help build this out of the network of people who organize the Hands Across the Sand rallies. I understand that some of you just came for information and not to get involved on a regular basis. Thank you for listening. I hope it wasn't a waste of your time. You may want to sign up to hear about any major events we throw. However, of course, in order to throw major events in the first place, we do need people who commit to a regular involvement. Again, we're thinking maybe every 2 weeks that, that we can discuss this. If you want to be involved, sign up and stick around afterwards, and we can set that up. Now we're going to throw the floor open for a conversation moderated by Georgina. So if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand, and she will write down a list of speakers so you don't have to keep holding your hand up the whole time. Please follow the guidelines she puts forward, so keep your comments brief so everyone can get a fair chance to speak in a reasonable amount of time. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.